Next, we'll have a program. Skip is going to be representing the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And without further ado, introduce it. What else? Skip?
Nobody has ever complained that they can't hear me, so if you can't, then be first. I spoke to a Unitarian fellowship about a year and a half ago at Newton, where I'm currently living. But I used to live here. I used to live on Schooley's Mountain. I used to live on Califon Road, right over Pleasant Grove. So I'm very familiar with the area. My name is Skip Hemschot. I was born in New York City, but I grew up over in Bergen County. I'm the oldest of 4 children. I have a brother, younger, and 2 younger sisters. I'm currently an attorney, self-employed attorney up in Newton, and I also am an adjunct professor of criminal justice at the Sussex County Community College. I've been there for about 12 years. As I said, I live in Newton. I'm divorced, no children. I was also the former chairman of the Sussex County Mental Health Board. And I am currently a NAMI connection facilitator, which is a peer group for people who suffer from mental illness. And we get together periodically, usually every 2 weeks, and discuss common issues and problems and other sorts of things. I don't really have a lot of hobbies. I was in a motorcycle accident 10 years ago, and I broke my back, and I'm not able to do a lot of physical stuff. That's a good excuse, by the way. When people ask you to pick this up or do this or help me do this, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I am interested in history. This is a really charming building. Does anybody know how old this is? The church?
Oh, was it 1837 or something like that? There's some.
That's a plaque.
Yeah, there's a plaque on there.
Yeah, I'm very interested in history, and I love the whole buildings. And this whole part of New Jersey is phenomenal for old buildings. I am here today speaking on behalf of New Jersey NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It's a grassroots organization dedicated to improving the lives of people who live with mental illness and their families. The focus of NAMI is more on the caregiver than the individual with the illness. NAMI has a number of programs for caregivers and family members. It was founded in 1979. It has become the nation's voice on mental illness. We have affiliates in every state, and we have local affiliates in every New Jersey county. And NAMI provides advocacy, research, support, and education about mental illness. NAMI has a number of statewide programs, in addition to this, where we educate police officers, school teachers, and the public, as well as a variety of multicultural programs. This particular presentation today is called In Our Own Voice. NAMI developed it back in 2002, and we currently make, over this now, 200 presentations per year. As part of the program, we're always looking for new venues. So if anybody has a suggestion of where we might speak next, please feel free to visit the NAMI website and look for the In Our Own Voice tab. And we also have a Facebook page that you can post to as well if you have any feedback. We're always looking for new audiences. The video, the DVD that you're going to see, is divided into 5 segments. First will be an introduction, so you can see who these people are. Then there's a section called Dark Days, which is the pits, really, of mental illness. Then the next segment is acceptance of the illness, then treatment, coping strategies, and successes, hopes, and dreams. After each segment, I'm I'm going to pause the video if I can, because I'm not technologically oriented, so I don't know how this is going to go. But at the end, I have a survey and a couple pens. If you could please fill them out and give them back to me so I can turn them in. We're always looking to refine the program and improve it. So if you have any suggestions, you can make them on the back of the forms. And then I will take questions at the end of the presentation.
My name is Kara Smilek, and I live in Pasadena, California. I'm a global nomad. I grew up all over the world.
My name is Robert. I'm 39 years old. I enjoy being outdoors and exercising, hiking, and running.
My name is Royal Riddick, and I enjoy having fun with my children and grandchildren.
My name is Cheryl Haven, and I like to go to my son's baseball games.
My name is Susie Pricecki, and I enjoy playing guitar.
My name is Heather McGraw. I am a native of the Northern Virginia area, and I am currently working as a waitress at Red Lobster.
My full name is Barry Shaw, and what I like to do is to write poetry. I write poetry, and I like to pray and meditate.
My name is Minnie Lucas, and I'm a mother of one. I've been married for 24 years.
My name is Dr. Suzanne Vogel-Shabilia, and I'm a practicing clinical psychiatrist in Western Pennsylvania. For me, my dark days tend to be primarily the depression, as it is with many people with the diagnosis of bipolar disorder.
My diagnosis is schizophrenia with panic disorder and OCD.
I got my diagnosis in 1999 with major depression with psychotic features.
My diagnosis is borderline personality disorder, and basically for me that means that I have severe mood swings, extreme mood swings.
My diagnosis is panic disorder with agoraphobia and substance abuse.
Oh, I have bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder.
I've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, and general anxiety disorder.
When I got the diagnosis of bipolar disorder,
Initially, I was diagnosed in my 30s, I believe it was, with clinical depression and anxiety.
When I was 18 and went into treatment for drugs and alcohol and started getting sober, I started having a lot of anxiety, panic attacks, to where if I was driving somewhere, I would start getting dizzy spells. My heart rate would go really fast. I would feel just afraid all of a sudden.
I would park in the parking lot, telling my wife I was going to work, and then call in sick and wait till she left home and went to work, and then go back home and go to sleep. So I think that was the point where I really knew something was wrong.
It just made me want to crawl into bed, crawl under my bed. That's a place I used to spend a lot of time. It was either under my bed or in the closet, someplace where I couldn't feel, think, hear, see, and be totally deprived from any kind of stimuli, because just being out in the world was too intense.
I'm a Korean American adoptee, and when my adoptive mom called me from home to tell me that my birth mother had contacted me by translated letter, that's when I went into my first full-blown manic episode.
In the morning I would start out high as a kite, and then by evening I would be suicidal. I was self-injuring, going from job to job, wasting a lot of time just wandering around doing nothing in a daze.
I eventually thought everybody was right. You know, I am a joke, I'm a failure, I'm a loser. What's the point of trying anymore? So I tried to end it by overdosing on the medication I was given to treat my disorder. That was probably one of my darkest days.
I felt worthless. I felt as though I was like an alien in the world that didn't belong. I always thought that I should be, the world would be better off if I was dead.
They thought that I was possessed by demons or that the house was haunted because I used to see people, and I used to hear voices. So they used to have the priest come down and bless the home, and they tried to do the exorcist on me so I can, get those demons out.
Initially, when I went to the VA in July of 1993 and asked for help and told what my concerns were, they told me that the earliest appointment I could get would be January 1994. By the time I got that appointment, I had lost my job. Child Protective Services came and took my daughter away, and I wound up home.
I would rather have broken bones. I'd rather have kidney stones I have to pass. I'd rather deliver 15-pound twins, with no anesthesia, than have a bad bout of depression.
My diagnosis initially with mental illness was major depression. That was the initial diagnosis. And depression, as these speakers have indicated, can usually produce very dark, gloomy, hopeless days. And my illness turned into manic depression, or bipolar disorder, as it's commonly called today, a few years later. So I want to speak a little bit about the manic phase of the illness, because most of these speakers talked about the depression. And make no mistake, the depression is horrible. As one of the speakers indicated, you want to go under your bed, you want to go in the closet, you want to avoid people as much as possible. You are afraid to get out of bed. Think of it as losing your closest relative suddenly, and how you feel, and that's 24/7. With no reason. You're just overwhelmingly sad. You can't concentrate, you can't accomplish anything, you feel completely worthless and utterly dependent on other people for everything. You can't do a single thing while you're suffering from a major depression. I've had suicidal ideations, which are thoughts and planning for suicide without actually carrying it out. Which was a good thing, because at the time I was working as a police officer in Passaic County. And I took a gun to work every day as part of my job. And I had the means to do it at any time. And I gave it a lot of thought. I really gave it a lot of thought. I'm not a violent person, so I never did do it. But one of the reasons I never did it is because of what it would do to my family, particularly my mother. If I were to commit suicide, it would have also killed her inside. She never would have come back after that. So I would do other things like letting my car drift over the center line and see how far I let it go before I pull back into my lane. So I spent a lot of time at the bottom of the illness. A few years later, I suffered a manic episode. So the diagnosis was changed from major depression to bipolar disorder. And mania is an interesting state of mind, actually. It's, you are incredibly euphoric. You are literally up over everybody, flying on a magic carpet, looking down on everyone. You have incredibly grandiose thoughts. At a point, I fully believed that I was communicating directly with God, bypassing everybody else and having a complete communication. You become very religious for some reason. I don't know why that is, but many people who suffer from the illness speak of that. You think you know everything, and you're convinced you do, and you're all too happy to tell somebody else that you know everything. It's like, if you don't have it, it's like adrenaline. If you think of how your body feels when you're reacting to a situation and you have adrenaline come into you, and it's like 24/7. Adrenaline never stops. It doesn't turn off. It just keeps you going. You don't need any sleep. I used to sleep maybe an hour or two. I didn't want to miss anything. So I'd only sleep for an hour or two, as opposed to depression where you can sleep 15 hours a day without any difficulty. So the manic side is a frightful part of the illness. And the reason that I call it dark, even though when you're manic, you don't ever want to stop, because you're feeling so strong and so good and so smart and so on top of things that you want that feeling to last forever. Meanwhile, you're destroying your life. You're destroying your friends, you're losing jobs, you're destroying your family relationship because of the way that you behave. But you're convinced everybody else has it wrong, and you don't. I was civilly committed the first time I experienced mania by a court order. I was transported to an inpatient psychiatric facility in full body restraints on a gurney. And the admittance door for patients was in the back of the hospital, and the ambulance went around the building and drove to the back of the hospital and backed up to the door. And I was shuffled out of the ambulance, and one of the things that I will never ever forget is when I stepped inside the building, they slammed the door behind me, it was a big heavy metal door, and they threw a deadbolt. And I'll never forget that sound of the door slamming and the deadbolt, because I was locked in at that point. I was no longer free to make my own decisions. All my choices were being taken from me, and for the next indefinite period, I was going to be told what to do pretty much every day. And it was the freedom that scared me. It was the loss of the freedom. Having worked as a police officer and taking people to jail, that's exactly what it felt to me. Like I was now being put in jail. I no longer had any liberty or freedom, and it was really at that point that I accepted the illness. The diagnosis of mental illness is very difficult to accept, and I'll talk about that after the next segment, but it really took that manic episode to as sick as I was, I realized at that point that this was really serious. It's not going to go away, and I got to deal with it.
I think the key for my acceptance was to realize that as a person with a mental illness, that I'm a person first. And I know it sounds kind of cheesy or cliche to some people, but really it's the truth.
I think what finally led me to the point where I could accept it was the support of friends and family. For them to say, Heather, you have a problem, but we love you anyway. That made it okay for me to say the same thing to myself.
I really didn't have a clear understanding of what I had until I was actually a resident in psychiatry. And I was working in an ER and had a severe episode at the time. And suddenly I had a patient who had the same symptoms I did. And I realized that I couldn't really deny this. I could see what the other patient had. And then it was very obvious that I had the same thing.
Now that I got this diagnosis, I can do something about it, just like I did something about the drug addiction. So acceptance just came right immediately. It's like, yes, that's it. I can do this now.
Another thing that helped me with my acceptance was to learn about famous people with mental illness. That gave me a lot of hope. You know, Michelangelo, Vincent van Gogh, Georgia O'Keeffe, Charles Schultz, Abraham Lincoln.
It's not my fault. It's not my parents' fault. You know, it's an illness that many people deal with, and that I'm not alone. I don't have to deal with it alone, and that I can go out and try to tell my story to help other people. And so that was the turning point for me.
NAMI has helped me by understanding, educating, and also not only me but my family. If it wasn't the fact that my family has been educated on this and I didn't have the support of my family, I think it would have taken twice as long for me to be in recovery.
Those of you that know anything about real estate know that the three most important words are location, location, location. When it comes to mental illness, the three words are denial, denial, denial. when I was diagnosed, which was more years than I care to admit ago, but there was very little treatment for mental illness at the time. I was diagnosed in the 1980s, and psychiatry at that time had not advanced to the point where it is today. And the understanding of mental illness at that time was kind of hush-hush. Nobody really talked about it. It was something that you didn't tell anybody about, didn't speak about. So the denial when I was first diagnosed was very high. I was determined to convince myself that this was a one-shot thing, it was just an aberration, it's going to go away, and it's just a bad experience, and that's the end of it. So I took some medication that I was given for a little while, and then I decided that I was better, so I threw out the medication, and a couple of weeks after that, I was back with the psychiatrist again because I had another bout of depression. And it repeated and repeated. Even through all of that, I was still denying that I had a mental illness. I didn't know what it was, so I did a lot of research. There was no internet. Al Gore had not invented that yet. And you actually had to read books. They were hardbound things that were in a library. So I went to several libraries. I went to several hospitals and gathered as much literature as I could about mental illness. And I came across this disorder called dysthymia and cyclothymia, which are lesser forms of depression and manic depression, bipolar disorder. So I decided that that's what I had. I had dysthymia, and nobody would ever know what that was, so I could tell people that, and they would just say, yeah, okay, right, whatever. And I could get by with that, so I did. I began to tell people I had this illness called dysthymia, and people, they were afraid to ask about it because they don't know what the heck it means or what it involves. So I got away with that for quite a while. The stigma of mental illness at that time was very high, particularly in law enforcement, and still is to a large extent in law enforcement. It's gotten better. But that's the reason that it's so hard to accept, because everybody at that time, it seemed that 90% of the world had no idea what mental illness was. And the image that comes to mind when you talk about mental illness, right, is Dustin Hoffman in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That's what everybody thinks mental illness is, that you're crazy. So you don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. So you don't admit it. The thing that helped me to accept it, really, and some of the speakers alluded to this, was family. I had the unwavering support of my two sisters and brother, particularly my sisters, who I was very close in age to. I was 16 years older than my brother, but I was very close in age to my sisters. And they accepted it before I did. They saw it, they realized it, they understood it, and they accepted it. And they helped me to accept it. Of course, along the way, until I finally accepted it, I lost a couple of jobs. I lost a 15-year marriage. I lost my best friend since high school. And it was a very traumatic experience over a period of many years until I finally accepted it. But one of the things I always tell people is you're never going to get better until you accept it. If you're continuing to deny that you have a problem, the medicine is just not going to work. Nothing's going to work for you. You have to accept and realize and say, yes, I am mentally ill. And look in the mirror when you say that, and then you've accepted it, and then you can...
Being an active partner in my treatment, I think, is very important. I used to kind of be very passive and just go to the doctor and whatever they said, I would just keep my mouth shut. But now, I read everything I can get my
my treatment consists of me seeing my therapist, me seeing my psychiatrist, me taking my meds. That is a 100% net must. I learned the hard way that I cannot stop taking.
In the 14 years since I've been in treatment, I haven't had a medication that I've taken yet that didn't have a side effect. It just goes with the territory as far as I'm concerned.
Even though there are a lot of side effects, I think that it's very important that one takes the medication. But one thing, I'd rather be a little husky and chubby and have a wonderful husband and have a wonderful life than to be skinny and in the hospital.
I had to trust my doctor before I could really let my treatment fully begin, because these are psychotropic medications affecting one of the most important organs in your body. So it was really important, I think, for me to be able to find that doctor that I could trust.
Therapy helped me work through a lot of issues that were going on in my life, but it also helped me in dealing with stress and doing relaxation techniques and things like that to reduce my anxiety. That was a big part of my treatment.
Treatment for me was a kind of an ongoing process. As I said, when I was diagnosed, initially there was one medicine for depression. One was called Elavil, a tricyclic drug, and that was what was prescribed. And there were no other options. Lithium was the treatment for mania, and there were no other options other than electroshock treatment. So in the 80s, treatment was very difficult. Psychotherapy was thought as to be a very important component of treatment. So there was more emphasis on psychotherapy than there was on medicine. I was in psychotherapy for about 11 years before I realized it wasn't really helping me that much. And I opted out of psychotherapy. Around that time, there were more medications coming onto the market in the mid-90s and late 90s. I initially had a favorable reaction to some of the newer medicines that were coming on the market. So I discontinued psychotherapy, and I haven't gone back to it. There are people, as you've seen on the video, who will swear by psychotherapy, and my response is, hey, if it works for you, do it. Do it all the time, if it works for you. But it didn't really work for me. It didn't bring about the result that I wanted to see, and I was in it for longer than I thought I should be. Now, I take a mood stabilizer for the mania. I take an antipsychotic drug because I've been psychotic and I've hallucinated, and I take a drug to keep that at bay. And I take a couple of different antidepressants because that is the most fearsome part of the puzzle. So my emphasis at this point for treatment is medicine. I see a physician, a psychiatrist, every once in a while for pharmacological maintenance. It's not therapy, it's just how's the medicine doing and how are you doing on it. And I was able to find a fairly aggressive psychiatrist who was not afraid to try different medicines. And I was certainly willing. So it was a lot of trial and error. Psychiatry doesn't really know what causes mental illness. They don't really know what the medicine does either. They have an idea in the brain what it's doing, but they don't know why it helps. They have no idea. It's largely, the ocean. We don't know anything about the bottom of the ocean, and they really don't know a heck of a lot about depression or bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, for that matter, either. However, the medicine does help, so that's the good news. There are a lot of side effects to the medication. A dry mouth is common, tremors, hand tremors. But there are more serious side effects. There's sexual dysfunction, there's liver failure. And they say that people with a mental illness who take psychotropic medications for a long period of time die sooner than the general population. I've seen that statistic many times. I don't know if it's true, because I haven't died yet, so I'll know when the time comes, I guess. But along the way, one of the most effective treatments that I had was that forced inpatient episode that I described a few minutes ago. The shock of being put into a mental health facility, inpatient, that shock was part of my treatment because it brought me around and it made me realize how serious the illness was.
For me, free time is dangerous. I need to have a highly structured day. So when I get up in the morning, I have to know exactly what I'm doing pretty much every moment of the day.
My dog is just great company. He's funny, so he makes me laugh. And because one of the side effects of medication is weight gain, and I had that really badly, he gets me out. The dog is also a great coping mechanism because it gives me the responsibility for something else. I don't have to look within inside myself all the time. I have to pay attention to the dog.
Humor is one of my coping skills, and I like spending a lot of time with family and my children and grandchildren. Great sources of relaxation.
Going to the gym and working out helps me in my stability and my coping skills because it gets me up out of bed.
In playing guitar, I had actually led worship for my old Bible study for about 4 months, and music creates so many great opportunities for expression and creativity, so that's a great coping skill.
It's been a huge blessing that I've been able to participate in things that are going on in my son's life. Like baseball games and skateboarding.
When I'm in church, I get a lift, I get a boost of energy that's unexplainable, so it makes a great deal important to me, that boost.
One of the biggest sources of comfort for me is my dogs. I love my dogs so much. I have 2 Welsh Corgis and Casey and Peaches, and they are just so cute and funny. Even when I'm feeling really bad, they just make me smile. Exercise has been really important for me because it helps to relieve stress, and it also helps to deal with some of the side effects of the medication.
Once you've accepted the diagnosis and you're in treatment, now you're going to cope with the illness, and how are you going to live, and how are you going to get by on a day-to-day basis. And some of the speakers told you what they do. It's very, very, very individualistic. It's unique to the person. There is no one path that you follow. One of the speakers talked about working, and I've always found that to be helpful because it puts a structure in your life. It's a place you have to go and things you have to do. So I always encourage other people with mental illness to try and work, not necessarily for pay. You can volunteer at a hospital, you can do something that you can feel proud of and you can accomplish something. And that sense of accomplishment while you're trying to grapple with mental illness is very important. It is uplifting, so I always encourage other persons that suffer from the illness. If they're on disability, I encourage them to try to get a volunteer position just a few hours a week because it's amazing how good you feel when you accomplish something. My employment is a little difficult because I am self-employed as an attorney, which means I have complete control over my day, and that can be good and that can be bad. Because if I am feeling depressed, there's nothing to stop me from staying in bed. I don't have to call anybody or get anybody's permission for that. So I can do that. The good part of that is I'm able to a large extent, regulate the workflow. And when I'm episodic, I can reduce the workflow. So that aspect of being self-employed is very helpful because you're able to control things to an extent. There are things that are out of my control. If I have a trial someplace and I have to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning, come hell or high water, you got to be there. And That's a very stressful part of an attorney's work when you're trying a case and you're up on your feet and you're the center of attention. That's a difficult exercise by itself without piling mental illness on top of it. The stress that comes from certain life events, the hormone cortisol that gets released in a high-stress episode is what contributes to depression and or mania. One of my coping skills is stress avoidance at all costs, as much as possible. Oftentimes, as I said, I can't get out of the way, but most times I can. I can get out of the way. I see it coming. If I anticipate that I'm going to be in a stressful situation, I can adjust my schedule before and after the stressful event. Like a trial, I'll take the day after the trial to relax. I won't go near the office. And I wouldn't think of anything legal for a day. And so I can kind of work with the stress. The stress avoidance is critical for a lot of people that suffer from mental illness because it's a trigger. Stress is a trigger. And if you talk to anybody who is suffering and you talk to them at any kind of length, you will discover that they recently had a stressful event of some sort just before they became episodic. So there is a definite connection or a link. Oddly enough, as a coping mechanism, sleep is a coping mechanism. If you don't get enough sleep, you're not going to be physically healthy and you're not going to be mentally healthy. If you don't get the proper amount of sleep, you're not going to be on top of your game, even under ordinary circumstances, let alone while you're suffering from mental illness. You have to have a lot of energy. This illness takes a lot to deal with. So you have to be on top of your game, or you're not going to be able to cope with it. I don't recommend oversleeping, but I can't emphasize sleep enough. People will say, I only need 4 hours, 5 hours, and that's a bunch of garbage. You need more, and you better get it, particularly if you're mentally ill, because you're not going to function well if you don't. Finally, one of the speakers indicated that humor is a coping skill, and it is. I occasionally see a little story or a joke involving people that are mentally ill, and it's in good taste. If it's in very good taste and it's funny, I'll be the first one to pass it on, because I think that you can't take this too seriously. Okay? You can't just brood all day long and all week about how horrible this illness is and how difficult it is to cope, and that's only going to push you deeper into the illness. So humor is a great thing. I have over in my briefcase, I have a little cartoon I cut out of the paper at Christmas time, and it has two women at a bar having a drink. And one woman is talking to the other, and she says, if somebody gave you, and then she went down, the 12 days of Christmas and the Leaping Pipers and all the, whatever it was, and she goes through this whole big list. And she says, if somebody gave you all this, would you think it was true love or mania? That's funny, because when you're manic, one of the things you do is spend a lot of money, and you buy everything in sight because you need everything, and you go deeply into debt. So I can appreciate that from a mental illness standpoint. So I mentioned that joke, and if a joke is in good taste, I encourage it actually, because it brings it out into the open, and the more it's out into the open, the more helpful it becomes. Finally, my last coping skill actually are my sisters. As I indicated before, they've been extremely supportive, and if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I'd be today. I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for their constant support over the many years that I've struggled with this illness, and it's unqualified support, and it's always there. And oftentimes they're the first ones to see a slide. If I'm sliding into an episode, they're the first ones to see it. Oftentimes the person with the illness doesn't recognize that they're getting into an episode. So having a cohesive family is incredible. critically important, and I feel very sorry for those that are mentally ill and homeless. I do a lot of advocacy on their behalf, because if you don't have that support system, coping is going to be almost impossible.
I define success for myself as enjoying my day-to-day life, enjoying my relationships with people I care about, and feeling as if I have a purpose in life.
So my goals have to do with my home-based business. I'd like to see it grow to the point where I can eventually get off of disability.
I lived in this trailer that was, I call it my dingy little trailer, but that was really the best home I ever had, because it was mine. I paid to live there by myself. I lived there by myself, and I could take care of myself, and I never knew that I could do that.
I'm just so happy that I'm going to be able to actually complete my PhD. But it'll always be that bachelor's degree. It'll always be that bachelor's degree that's my biggest success.
I went to Elmhurst College and finished my degree in psychology. That was a big achievement for me, because I never thought that after my illness that I could accomplish anything again.
I just got a scholarship to Berkeley to a summer program. So I hope to transfer to Cal Berkeley in psychology. And, it seems like a dream, but I think it's attainable if I keep working hard. And, a lot of great stuff's happening. So.
I have a great job. I would not give my job up for anything in the world. I help people to help themselves so they can help other people in this tremendous illness. And educating people, I think it's one of the things that I can call a success, that I am out there helping educate people and eliminate the stigma of mental health.
I never in my life thought I would have got married. I never in my life thought I would have anybody to love me enough to marry me. And when I met her, it just, man, it was so awesome. I mean, she accepted me, and she fell in love with me, and I fell in love with her, so that's another part of my success too. I mean, she's my greatest success of all, besides getting up this morning.
I see that we're getting close to time, so I'll kind of go through the last segment briefly. The bad news about mental illness is it's permanent. It's not going to go away. There's no cure. The good part about it is, though, recovery. You can recover, you can function relatively normally, whatever that is, and you can get by, and you can enjoy life. The medication that's available today is overwhelming. There's dozens of medications. It doesn't cure, or it doesn't help everybody, but a much larger percentage of people today with mental illness are in recovery than there was 20 years ago when I started the Odyssey. So in terms of hopes and dreams, I just hope that the place I am will continue, and that I will feel as good tomorrow as I feel today. And if that happens, then it's been a success for me. I'm very happy that I can run a law firm. I have an employee that depends on me, and I'm very happy that I can do it. I'm very happy that I was able to go to law school and graduate and work as a police officer and deal with mental illness all together at the same time. As far as dreams, I mentioned to you a few minutes ago that there is this statistic that I keep seeing that those with a severe mental illness don't have the same life expectancy as somebody without a mental illness. I understand. I read the statistic. I don't know where it comes from, but I read the statistic. But I take it one day at a time. I'm not really that worried about where I'm going to be in a year from now, where I'm going to be tomorrow. I'm going to continue to advocate for mental illness. I speak on a couple of different topics. One of them is the criminalization of mental illness. I've lectured before college audiences and a whole variety of other audiences on mental illness and different aspects of mental illness. And I want people to see me. I want them to see it up close, personal, and see how it can be handled and it can be dealt with, and you can recover. That is the good news. In closing, this is not a sales pitch, but there is a great book and two great DVDs. If you're interested in learning more about the illness, particularly bipolar disorder, there is a book out there called The Unquiet Mind by Kay Jamison, who is a psychologist, and she wrote the book while she was manic. She wrote it in the middle of a manic episode, and it is incredibly realistic. And if you read that book, it's a short read, it's a little paperback, you'll get a really good insight into what a manic attack is really like. There are also two great DVDs about mental illness. One is called A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe. It's the story of John Nash, the Princeton University professor that suffered from schizophrenia who won a Nobel Prize. And there's another movie with Jamie Foxx called The Soloist, which deals with how music can help those with mental illness. So what we'll do is we'll run the last segment of the DVD, and then I'll take any questions that anybody has. And I also have these evaluations, if you wouldn't mind.
Mental illness is not for sissies. It's something that you really have to realize is going to change your life.
One thing that's really important for me in my life today is that it's like the baseball game. You know, the people that I choose in my life today, I want people who are going to make my team the best team, you know. So it helps me to pick positive people in my life.
And now my mom and my brothers and sisters are a big part of my recovery. They're there for me, and my husband and my son are the most important people in my life.
I would not let this illness defeat me. I would not let it beat me. And my faith told me that, you know, with the strength of my God that I believe in, that I can do anything and I can survive this illness.
I want to show other people, look, you can have something serious, but you can live a healthy life and you can be in recovery.
These stories demonstrate how some individuals with mental illness experience recovery. Recovery is not only a reality for some, but also a possibility for millions of Americans affected by one of these serious medical illnesses each year.
So I'll be more than happy to answer any questions, however personal, that you might want to ask about any aspect of the presentation. So we have just a few minutes. Yes.
This question goes across medically, physically, almost. How do you find a psychiatrist that's
Or your psychotherapist told you.
That is probably one of the most difficult things you've ever tried to do. I've been through many psychiatrists. Unfortunately, it's a lot of trial and error. You know, you hear from someone who's doing well with a particular psychiatrist, so maybe you visit that psychiatrist and you find out that he or she isn't working with you at all. It's not happening. So, well, some person, you know, I'm very reluctant to tell anybody who my psychiatrist is because I have a good rapport with him, but somebody else who might go to see him might have a different reaction and not be successful. So it's very hard to recommend any particular psychiatrist or psychologist for psychotherapy because everybody reacts differently. So unfortunately, the answer to your question is it's really trial and error. It takes a long time. It takes a really long time.
Does NAMI have a list?
Oh yeah. You can go to the NAMI website. If you want any more information at all about mental illness and any kind of question, you can always go to the NAMI website. NAMI, the national NAMI has a whole bunch of stuff on their website about mental illness and psychiatry, you know, almost anything you can think of. New Jersey NAMI has its own website also as well. Anybody want to know what baseball team I like?
Sure.
Which sexual euphoria?
The sexual euphoria
Yeah.
and acting out on that in the manic phase.
That-
And
yeah.
I'm hoping that that was only perhaps in the pilot, and I mean, if that's my mapping is part of it.
It's unfortunately, it's a large part of mania. It's a very big unspoken part about mania.
It's the black box, that's the name of the show.
Oh, is that the name of it, the Black Box?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd seen previews for that, I hadn't watched it. But yeah, the sexual euphoria and reckless conduct is a really a big part, unfortunately, of being manic. Just like religiosity and thinking that you are the Christ is also a big part of being manic. So yeah, unfortunately, I would have liked to have seen that. I saw previews, but I didn't know it was going to start.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they'll get into.
Oh, I'm sure they'll go into different aspects.
Yes, because she certainly talked about how when she went off her meds, she did feel that, you know, how powerful and strong the positive feelings were, that it was so hard in some ways to give that up. Like,
Yes.
you know,
When you're manic, you don't want it ever to
you don't
stop.
want it to
You
stop.
don't want it ever to
And
stop.
that was pretty clear.
Being Unitarian, I have to ask the question, do you think that the person Jesus was bipolar?
That's an interesting question. I'll have to think about that. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. Certainly depression might have been part of, if I were crucified, I think I'd be pretty depressed.
I have a question for you. I'm a psychiatric nurse, and I see all the warts and flaws of our system. As an inpatient, what did you find the most helpful, and maybe I'm worse than what was bad about it? What was the least helpful thing?
The most helpful thing about being inpatient is being with other people that suffer from mental illness like you, because up until that point, you don't really associate with a lot of people that have it. And when you're inpatient, that's all you see are people with mental illness. So it's a big eye-opener to be in an institution with a bunch of other mentally ill people that are struggling as much as you are. And the group sessions are extremely helpful, particularly if people talk. A lot of people don't want to talk about it, but the group sessions really bring out a lot of information. And you can see how other people are coping in a group session. As far as the least helpful thing was the medical staff, and I hate to say this, but there was a lot of callousness in the medical staff. There was a lot of coldness in the medical staff. I realized that you have to keep a professional distance, but it was way too far. The professional distance was way too far. It was just very difficult to meet with someone on the staff and talk about anything. They didn't want to be bothered. So I guess that would be the worst part, was the staff was not as helpful as they could have been. Anyone else? No? At a time, I think. Oh, one more?
How are you in the law enforcement when you were diagnosed with an illness?
You asked about law enforcement? Or what was your
How
question?
are you in the law enforcement job when you've been diagnosed with mental illness?
How am I in it?
I know that they screen for that very, very carefully and they don't allow it.
Well, not necessarily.
How do you get around it?
With law, I started in law enforcement while I suffered from depression. Hadn't morphed into manic depression yet. I was never asked in the entire interview process whether I suffered from a mental illness. And this is going back 30 years. So it was a little easier 30 years ago. They do screen applicants for mental illness, but...
Is it possible to be a police officer if you have mental illness?
Oh yes, it is. You can get around the screening process.
Oh, you can?
Oh yeah, you can get around the screening process. If you're smart and you understand the screening process. But I went into law enforcement way back at the beginning when I was just starting this odyssey, and it wasn't a big topic at that time. Anybody else?